everyone, Kinsey Schofield here. Welcome to Royally Unfiltered, the show that takes you behind the palace gates like never before. This is where tradition meets truth and nothing is off limits. This week, helping me tackle all of the biggest headlines are two of my favorite royal authors, Hugo Vickers and Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Now, you two are friends, so I'm already feeling like the third wheel, but the energy is really good between you two, so I think this is going to be an incredible show. First of all, Hugo, it's so nice to meet you. You are such a beautiful writer, and I love reading your work. Was this a wild year for you, I would ask, when it comes to covering the royal family?
Well, it was rather unexpected, wasn't it? Because it was really events out of their control. I mean, their sort of illnesses that sort of suddenly assailed them, just as they'd sort of beginning to get into their stride, they all seem to be laid low one after another. So I think it's been a year in which they've shown resilience and courage and done their best under very difficult circumstances. So it hasn't really been much fun in that respect.
Mm. Tessa, do you agree or disagree? We've spoken throughout the year, but as we get closer to the end, are you impressed with the way that it's been handled?
It's been an extraordinary learning curve, I think, for both parties, both for the royal family and also for the public, and perhaps more specifically, the media, which is one of the interfaces between the royal family and the public, about what we expect from royalty when they're not 100%, and likewise, how royalty reflects that personal status back at us, how they manage it and manage our expectations. And if you look back to February, March, when the world seemed to go mad for the want of Kate, to where we sit now with Kate, really, I think, representing one of Britain's most impressive, certainly best known stateswomen, I would almost put her down as, things have really changed very fast.
Absolutely. Let's reflect on the last year. It hit us like a ton of bricks starting in January with the announcement from Buckingham Palace that King Charles would receive in-hospital treatment for an enlarged prostate. The king underwent a corrective procedure, we were told at the time. Quickly following this announcement, visits to the NHS website's prostate enlargement page shot up by more than 1,000. Hugo, this is more information than we typically receive from the royal family. Why do you think they chose that direction? Could it be the NHS that seeing that the way that he inspired people to actually be concerned about their own health?
I think he was putting his woes to good advantage, if I can put it like that. I mean, the fact that he had this procedure and so forth, he wanted others to avoid it. And as you rightly point out, it had a supremely good effect and lots of people went along to get tested. And so I think that he felt happy to share that in a way that other members of the family in the past haven't. Illness was always really one of the subjects that they always tried to avoid. Historically, there's hardly ever any mention of it. And even now, the Royal Archives gets pretty cross if you start going on about George III and what may or may not have been wrong with him. So it was a great departure, and I think all credit to him actually for doing that.
Tessa, I'd love your response to that. And I'd also ask, was there anyone that, did you hear, was there anyone that criticized this decision and allude to the fact that perhaps it could make the monarchy look unstable?
Actually, no, I don't think there was. I'm recalling that at the same time, there was the emerging news about Kate, what began as abdominal surgery and then we later discovered had a cancerous aspect. Now, initially, I think the king, in order to, in some ways, protect his daughter-in-law, and the other way round, I think they sort of shared that platform and it took the heat, particularly out of Kate as the younger, more glamorous player, took the heat or gave her some kind of, I think, flanking, for want of a better expression. If the precedent is established by the king, then as the Princess of Wales, she could sort of fall in behind. So it was interesting because on one level, of course, it's far more constitutionally significant if the king has a potentially life-threatening condition, but it's far more shocking when it is a younger member of the royal family and one who really embodies the future, is the heartbeat, if you like, of the future royal family.
I'm glad you said that because I remember at the time the nasty internet gossip was look at the way King Charles has swooped in to take attention away from the Princess of Wales abdominal surgery. And most of us that had any sense sat back and thought, or is he trying to take the heat off of her
Yeah.
because he knows that this is going to create a really toxic, you know, headline storm around her. So I'm very, very glad that you pointed that out, that you feel like that was a strategy to take some weight off of her. So thank you so much for doing that. Now, Buckingham Palace announced in a statement in February, this was February 5th, 2024, that King Charles had been diagnosed with an unspecified form of cancer during the treatment to address a benign enlarged prostate condition. The month before, doctors found something else. Hugo, what was your initial response here? I mean, we're concerned in January, but the palace tells us, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. And then we get some pretty jarring news.
And we had a lot of Queen Camilla going in and out of the hospital, which was probably something she wouldn't have done if it had just been a very straightforward procedure. So I think this did become very worrying. And we haven't actually been told specifically what it is. I mean, we think it's all under control now, but he is still having treatment, and he went to Australia and stopped the treatment, as you know, for that short period of time, and that seemed to be working pretty well. But I mean, he's obviously, he's not fully back to health, and he's doing a really amazing job. And I just feel so sorry for him that, having waited for so long, suddenly he becomes a head of state, and suddenly he can talk to other heads of state one to one. People are listening to him, taking him more seriously. Curiously, as king, what he says is different from what he might have said as Prince of Wales. He was it looked as though he was interfering before, and now he can have a one-to-one with Macron or President Biden or whatever. And suddenly to be sort of, find himself unable to do that, and unable to do except a very limited amount of engagements, must have been extremely depressing for him, I think.
And that be the topic. If he does have that moment, then wanting to talk about his health versus something that he's really passionate about and he's waited all of this time to actually be able to delve into. Tessa, if you'd like to react to what Hugo said, I'd love to hear that from you. But I'd also ask, do you believe that keeping a cancer diagnosis a secret was not an option? We would have noticed his absence.
We would, I think, have increasingly asked questions. You just need to look at the furore over President Biden's health latterly towards the end of this year to recognise that the 24/7 media doesn't miss a trick. And okay, power doesn't reside with Charles, but he is our head of state. And I think there has to be a level of candour, even if we don't elect him in. And of course, unlike Biden, who has to have his finger on the button, there has been this ironic boon, I think, in the king's popularity. So while Hugo talks of a certain wistfulness about, Charles maybe not fulfilling kingship in the way he would have wished, Charles is also a practical man. He acceded the throne hardly a spring chicken in his mid-70s. And the cancer diagnosis has had this kind of curious halo effect, where previously there was a lot of criticism, not only, but partly around the handling of the Meghan and Harry story. How could this, father let his son go like that, etc. And I think actually what it's done, the cancer diagnosis, has reminded us that even our king is a mortal. And it's given him this sort of softer hue, and rather puts the pressure on other family members, especially errant ones like Harry and Andrew.
Hugo, what is your response to that? Do you feel like people were incredibly critical of the king when it came to Harry and Meghan, and this shifted the tone media-wise? Because I agree with Tessa. It felt like it was attack, 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 and then all of a sudden we pulled back and said, "Oh, something serious is going on behind the scenes, and maybe we should stop the tit for tat."
Well, I would put it slightly differently, because I think that, in fact, I know he was extremely surprised by the incredible response to him, the affection for him and concern for him, the number of cards that he received and messages, because he's always been worried about his popularity and wondering whether people don't like him. And sometimes, of course, in the past, they haven't liked him. I mean, he's had a pretty rough ride sometimes. So I think that's really the main thing. I don't think you can criticize him for the way he handled Harry and Meghan. He's been incredibly good about saying nothing and not responding to any of the javelins thrown at him. And he's left the door wide open for them, or at any rate for Prince Harry, at some point to return if need be. He hasn't said a single thing. Prince Harry's said quite a lot.
That's the truth. All right. In March of 2024, the Princess of Wales announced that she had been diagnosed with an unknown form of cancer after undergoing what Tessa mentioned earlier, a major abdominal surgery in January. And the surgery was initially thought to be non-cancerous, but tests later indicated that cancer was present. Hugo, this was a very difficult video to watch. You know, I asked Tessa about the stability of the monarchy earlier. How were you personally feeling about the stability of the monarchy after such a vulnerable and compelling video in March of 2024?
Well, fun enough, I mean, I don't think the question of the stability of the monarchy occurred to me at all. It was huge sympathy for her, and also the feeling that she had been forced to do that by the grotesques and media speculation that was going on about her. And then, of course, the slightly unfortunate, well, very unfortunate, I suppose, business of that photograph, which was meant to reassure us that she was well, and very soon had the opposite effect, you know, because it was discovered that it had been photoshopped, and it didn't fulfill its purpose. And so I think at that point, you know, she had to do something, and one just feels sort of like, golly, what else are they going to make her do? But it was painful to watch, very brave of her to do it. But luckily, after that, at least the media has left her alone and realized that, you know, she's got to get well in her own time, and has welcomed any appearance that she has made. Watch Wimbledon. I mean, the moment she walked into that centre court, you know, the enthusiasm and response for her was amazing. And so she must have felt, you know, very much cheered by that at least.
Very much. Tessa, I have two questions for you. A, do you agree with Hugo that she was forced to make that video? Because there had been some reports that, oh, this was always the plan. But my initial instinct was how sad that we bullied her into this video. And B, would you consider that photo maybe the only or the biggest mistake this year when it comes to the royal family? Because I struggled with that too. I thought, oh, how did anyone allow this to happen? The Mother's Day photo.
Well, first let's look at the video. I think the video can best be understood in the wake of the Photogate scandal around Mother's Day. And that was a sign of Kensington Palace regrouping. And it was a massive rethink and a very effective one. And actually so effective that they repeated it at the end of this summer when she announced that she was cancer-free for the time being. She'd completed her treatment, and it was all very beautifully shot in sort of sunny hues in Norfolk. A real sign that they felt that early video when she was sitting among daffodils had been a success story. Of course, the context for that is the disastrous photograph. What's interesting is that it gave us an insight in the way in which William and Kate really have a sort of very personal handle over a lot of the way their image is projected, which I think is surprising, certainly to me, and I'm sure to many others. There's this idea that everything's, you know, terribly controlled and nothing spontaneous that comes out of either or any of the palaces. And yet this was clearly Kate cobbling together a photograph. I really believe it was, and sort of thinking, oh, well, I'll just, you know, put C in a kiss and hopefully that'll float for the time being. And when I feel a bit stronger, I'll come out and say something more to the effect of what's going on. And the fact she didn't get away with it, I think, was because she'd been weirdly honest in her amateurness. Like she hadn't, clearly Kensington Palace hadn't gone, I didn't feel it had the stamp of Kensington Palace, that doctored photograph. It was sort of Kate, I could imagine her doing it over toast and marmalade. You know, so on one level, once we had more of an idea of what was going on, I felt an affection for her as this sort of mother that was being a bit put upon, that was just sort of trying to hold back the tide with that photo.
Absolutely. I mean, I just imagine trying to wrangle three beautiful, highly energetic babies to all make a perfect face for a perfect photo.
Yeah.
I remember saying at the time, I feel like this is an innocent mistake. Everybody wanted it to be something so, so something so, there was something sinister happening behind the scenes. And it's like, honestly, Tessa, you know, my butt is 3 times bigger than it looks on the internet because I take very good, careful with Photoshop. Poor Hugo's not
Did you
reacting.
hear that, Hugo?
but everybody does it, and you're right, because everybody does it, it almost made her seem so much more human and adorable because we all do it. And then when we found out the truth, it was devastating because we thought she might have felt insecure. She might have felt insecure about the way she looked. Who knows what was going on, but an innocent mistake is certainly the way that I took that photo. After announcing that she was receiving cancer treatment in March, the Princess of Wales had been absent from public life. We had laid off, if I recall correctly, no one was really bothering her. And then Catherine was, everyone was so excited to welcome her at Trooping the Color in June, making her first royal outing since really Christmas of 2023 amid her cancer scare. Hugo, is the feeling in June, looking at how beautiful and choreographed Trooping was, that the royal family was back on the right track? Or was there any hesitation for you in watching all of Trooping, that display? Did you think, okay, things are going to be good, or were you hesitant at all?
Um, I was hesitant from the point of view of the fact that it was great to see her. And as you know, from time to time, she has come out and done things, but then she disappears again. So, again, she needs time to get better. So I wasn't sort of suddenly saying all is well again, but it was just obviously a very good positive sign. What I can tell you is that I am told that she is very, very much better now. And I think things have settled down and I think she gets quite tired sometimes. I'm sure she does from the treatment she's getting. I'm sure the king does too. But let's just hope that 2025 is a better year for all of them, frankly.
I love we got our scoop, Tessa. We got a scoop from Hugo.
Yeah.
Look at us. Tessa, feel free to respond, but I'd also like to ask you if your opinion of Catherine has changed at all this year after watching the way she's handled this.
Well, yes, a couple of things. One is, I think, these very rare appearances, which were very choreographed, and she looked absolutely splendid. I remember Trooping the Colour, it tipped it down in a way they only can in England. And there she was in this exquisite tailored Jenny Packham dress, wafer thin, but absolutely perfect. And you just realised how much the royal family need her. In some ways, it was like this rare orchid, this glimpse of something that was going to be, shut away again and then re-released, perhaps for, I don't know, the Wimbledon. And then, of course, we saw her for Remembrance, etc. And so we've seen, as her appearances have gone down and been far fewer, you've seen her stock in many respects rise. And I fell on my sword. I did something unusual. In fact, I asked him to do it too. I apologized for the way in which I'd sort of joined in the speculation about William and Kate's reluctance at the sort of front, the vanguard of monarchy in February and March, because obviously we weren't sure exactly what was going on. And I definitely played my part in the speculative storm. And it felt so inappropriate and really immoral in the wake of what we then discovered. And so, yeah, I apologized for that because I felt that I'd got it wrong, and I wasn't the only one. You won't be surprised to hear that Piers Morgan didn't apologize, by the way.
I won't, but I feel like I apologized, but if I didn't, I will apologize 1,000 times over. I hated those conversations and I tried to defend them as much as I could, but the Mother's Day photo is where I felt like I don't know how to respond going forward. Thankfully, they were quick to apologize for that and explain it away. But that was the first time that I felt like I had egg on my face because I had been so fiercely defending them, saying, she's had serious abdominal surgery, leave her alone. Can we just allow this person to rest? And then the photo came out and I thought, oh no, now what are we supposed to say? How would you describe, Hugo, how would you describe Catherine after 2024? She was always so delicate to me. And now I look at her as, there's so much strength within her that I didn't know existed.
Yes, I think she will have come out of it extremely well. But I mean, she always has done, though, hasn't she? I mean,
Mm.
I didn't sort of share any of this sort of, uh, I don't know. I suppose when there was the silence, I mean, it occurs to me, why should she say anything? I mean, the king, okay, he says something about his illness. He's an old guy, a young woman. It's not very romantic to start going into medical
Mm.
details, and why just leave her alone? I mean, it never occurred to me that there was any reason why one should do anything else, and yet the silence seemed to somehow inspire all this kind of absolutely shocking stuff, and really sometimes considerable sort of aggression, almost hatred of her, which I'd never seen before, I must say, ever, and I certainly don't think it's there now, which is good. And she is a mother and a wife. They've had a very difficult year. If you think about it from Prince William's point of view, the big problem for the Prince of Wales is he never knows when he's likely to become king. If his father is ill, then that focuses it hugely. If he then also has an ill wife and 3 small children, and then all the other problems of the world, I mean, what on earth have they been going through? It must have been absolutely grim. And he did say so, did he not? That this was the worst year of his life. And one or two people made the point, golly, that's saying a lot, because he had a pretty bad year when his mother was killed too. So, he must have
Yeah.
been through a terribly difficult time. I have huge sympathy for all of them, frankly.
I agree. Hugo, I'm going to ask you a question, and Tessa's probably going to throw her microphone at me. I'll allow you to respond, Tessa. Please don't be mad. But Hugo, do you feel like Prince Harry and Meghan stirred the pot so much that kind of incited people against the Princess of Wales? Because we know that she is finding out in December of 2023 that there is something going on, that she needs severe abdominal surgery. What also is happening around 2023? Endgame. Omid Scobie's Endgame. The Dutch version claims that it's King Charles and the Princess of Wales that made these comments about Archie. So we're all stirred up again talking about this half story that Harry and Meghan have never fully told. So there are too many question marks that surround it. But the media, and especially in the States, are saying that the alleged royal racists could potentially be the king and Catherine, because of a Dutch version that was released of Omid Scobie's Endgame. Catherine announces she's having abdominal surgery, she's disappearing. So could have a lot of the toxicity that was created around her absence, do you think any of it could be related to Endgame and the accusations made against her that started with that Oprah Winfrey interview?
Well, the Oprah Winfrey interview, it was very, very difficult to criticize it as one should have done, because immediately, if you did so, you would be accused of entering the racist territory or the mental health issues, and so it was very difficult to say anything. But I don't know what you think these days, but I mean, since then, we've heard so many other things that I think that's pretty discredited, that interview. And personally, I'm so sorry, but please don't make me try and take anything that Omid Scobie writes seriously. I'd forgotten he even existed, and I never bought the book. I buy virtually every royal book that's on the market just to have it as reference. I certainly didn't bother to buy those ones.
Tessa, please respond.
Well, have I
Well,
said
I
something?
do have Endgame because
It was
I
great.
had
I
to
loved it.
review
I'm
it for
crying.
someone. I actually had to review Endgame for a publication, and I didn't give it a positive review. I felt it was unnecessary. I felt just as things were dying down, going into abeyance up, they were all kicked by Omid Scobie. And again, then there was that story of who were the 2 people who were the racists in the royal family. I mean, there was a sort of ridiculous witch hunt, which was sort of, I agree, in many ways, the Sussexes could have put out more effectively. They sort of did a half-hearted effort to downplay things, but it wasn't totally extinguished. And I think they've got to take a bit of responsibility for that. However, I do. And, I always will have a little bit of sympathy for Harry and Meghan. Yes, they've behaved like recalcitrant children. They've gone off in a strop. They've thrown the toys out of the pram. They've, given the institution a bit of a kicking. And with it, some of the mud they've kicked up has been personal. It's fairly unedifying stuff. But on the other hand, given Harry as a product, a prince and a product of the palace, given his sort of slightly torturous upbringing, none of it's really that surprising. And in some ways, there was a naive bravery to their efforts, and they weren't possibly to know or guess in a million years that Kate was going to be knocked for six by the big C in her early 40s. So it was kind of unfortunate. And of course, far greater sympathy sits with Kate. But I did think, wow, that's, the optics are looking particularly awkward now for Harry and Meghan. And I'm sure actually that Harry would like to try and make inroads back, if not to Britain, then back in with his dear papa. And those have proved harder, I think, to achieve than he'd have otherwise liked. And I'm sure it's partly got to do with the back end of last year and Endgame and all that hoo-ha.
Absolutely. I'm just asking you off the top of my head, and I'd like a response from both of you. When I was putting together this highlight of the year and low light of the year, really, I struggled to find anything significant that Harry and Meghan have accomplished this year. I mean, typically we could say Prince Harry wrote a best-selling book, or there was a commercially successful series that was streamed on Netflix. I'm not being critical. I just truly have, when I think about what Harry and Meghan have executed professionally, and maybe I'm only talking commercially because I believe we saw them in Canada to do some promotion for Invictus Games. I'm always a cheerleader for Invictus Games. But all I could think about was a jar of jam, like Kris Jenner's jar of jam. Have they done anything in 2024 that have moved them forward successfully in their career paths, if we can even identify or define what they're trying to do today? Tessa, I can't tell by the look on your face if you have an answer. If anyone likes to answer first, please do.
I think they've had a couple of reasonably successful overseas tours. Colombia, and I believe they went to Nigeria. And that was in the wake of a very successful 10th anniversary of Invictus Games in London, where I felt it was the king that dropped the ball because he didn't meet his son for a cup of tea. So while you're right, there is no grand Netflix production. I believe, though, there is one in the pipeline. We have nonetheless seen them in this quasi-royal get-up, visiting countries where actually we would have traditionally hoped the royal family might go, but perhaps countries that talk more or play more to the Sussexes' strengths. So I'm going to say that it hasn't been a sort of stellar year, but they're not off the radar. And they haven't, unlike preceding years when they have dug a bit of a personal ditch for themselves in terms of their critique of their own families. This year, they've stayed well clear of that. And I think they've behaved in a more dignified way.
Hugo, I agree that those tours were considered successful, but when we can't define what their objective is, what the Archwell objective is do we still consider it a success, or was it just a pretty tour with some positive headlines? I love Tessa, but I struggle to find the meaning of the tours. So is it technically a success if I don't know what the purpose of them is?
Well, I think sometimes with a country like Colombia, you should try and look at what's going on in that country, which they're trying to kind of cover up by inviting somebody like Harry and Meghan to come along, because the Foreign Office actually in this country, I think it's the third most dangerous country in the world, and British are told not to go there. And obviously they went there, and the trouble with them is that they have to keep reinventing themselves because they've gone down the celebrity route. And the royal family itself doesn't do that, and the royal family are working for the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth and for all of us, not for themselves, and they are working for themselves. And so they have to keep reinventing themselves, and they have to keep on doing different things, which will get people like you and unfortunately also me talking about this from time to time. I mean, if the worst thing that can happen to them, I guess, is if people stop talking to them, talking about them at all, which could happen, of course, at some point in the future. And the only reason, of course, that we're really interested in what Meghan Markle is up to is because she married Prince Harry. And, there's a lot of other actresses doing lots of interesting things. They don't get nearly the same publicity as she does. It's very unfortunate, the whole thing, I think.
Tessa, did you want to respond, or are you willing to just
Well,
let Hugo have
it's
his
just,
last word?
you know, Hugo is a dear, right? Now, that's not to put you in the same age category as the king by calling you a dear, but I have to point out, if this isn't too indiscreet, Hugo, that in Hugo's garden, to scare away the birds, he actually has cardboard cutouts of Harry and Meghan. Okay, so he's not hugely impartial
It's an
when.
anti-burglar device. It terrifies the life out of people if they come through the door unexpectedly. They see them. I bought it at the time of the royal wedding, when they were being sold, and it's now sitting outside. And I mean, I just dread that somebody's going to have a heart attack, and I'm going to find them sort of flat on their face because they're scared of these two people.
So
I
that
have an Edward
plants.
Cullen cutout that I use in the front room so that no one knows that I'm not home. So I understand what Hugo's talking about. It's our scarecrow. It's our modern day scarecrow.
Yeah,
It is.
what
So
better?
that's just so everyone's aware of what side Hugo sits this particular fence. I think your answer, Hugo, if I may, and as we would expect, was thoroughbred establishment. Oh, boo hiss, Harry and Meghan have got to go and be, tawdry celebrities. Meanwhile, the royal family, on they toil, great sacrifice for the nation. But as a very revealing documentary explained here in Britain, this is really an unprecedentedly wealthy family that is exempt from the taxations that the majority of us are burdened by, who don't have a single financial worry really in the world, except having so much there is a bit of sort of a management headache that has to go on. And I think while Harry is in no way poor, lest we forget, he's inherited from his grandmother, from his mother, etc. He's absolutely got pots of money. But it's a very, very different game not being buoyed up or supported by an institution that you were born into. He wasn't born Harry the plumber, he was Harry the prince. Once a prince, always a prince. And I think it's understandable this journey has been harder than he anticipated. And I don't like either comparing him any longer to the royal family because it's simply not a level playing field, or indeed mocking him because he's had to sort of go on this journey, partly through his own volition very publicly, but it would anyway be very public. And I think that's difficult to find your feet so publicly in a totally foreign realm, and not just foreign because America's a different country, but foreign because Harry had never been outside of an institution, whether it was a boarding school, a royal family, or an army.
Tessa, I'm going to stop comparing him to the royal family when he stops insisting on putting produced by Harry, the Duke of Sussex on his Netflix trailer. I'm so sorry I took us off on this tangent because I'd like to get back to the working royals. The Princess of Wales will host her fourth Together at Christmas Carol service this December. This year's service provides a moment of reflection upon the importance of love and empathy and how much we need each other, especially in the most difficult times of our lives. Hugo, I still find the Princess of Wales to be very much a mystery. Does this event tell us anything about her heart or her personality?
Well, I think it's a very successful event, and it's becoming, a much looked forward to feature of Christmas. She's done a really good job with that. So she's found an identity through that, I think, which is great. As to being a mystery, well, I don't know. Is she such a mystery?
Well, I compare her to Queen Elizabeth, where I know I love her, but I don't feel like I don't know her favorite TV show. I don't know what perfume she wears. I almost think it's beneficial to her because I think that she's like Queen Elizabeth in that way. But I know so much about, I know Meghan Markle's favorite perfume and I know where she shops. I just feel like there's something special about having that absence of information. But
Well, yeah, you put your finger on it, haven't you, really? I mean, and of course, the great success of the Queen was that we didn't know what she was thinking. And I'd love to know at what point she suddenly worked out that she had more to gain by saying nothing than sort of weighing in, as we all seem to feel we have to do on any issue. Because there must have been times when she's heard people talk, the Queen heard people talking complete nonsense, would have loved to contradict them, but she didn't say a thing. She sometimes just smiled. And it was brilliantly successful. And if Catherine is taking that line, well, good for her. I mean, it'll pay off.
agree. And Tessa, you have such incredible knowledge historically of the royal family. How does this event rank when it comes to other royal family traditions, this carol concert? And is there anything you could compare it to?
Well, it's interesting because sometimes the royal family, they're not perceived as leading in modernizers. I mean, they are there really as a sort of traditional bastion that upholds these revered concepts of Britishness. But at the same time, we have seen the king, and I'm trying to remember, Hugo will correct me, but I think it was George the Fifth who did the first Christmas radio broadcast, and then
Yes,
George the Sixth televised them, and then the Queen, or was it the Queen who did the first televised one?
Queen
It was the
televised
Queen.
first.
Sorry, I'm going wrong. The Queen televised it. The radio tradition was under the George the Fifth, her grandfather, and George the Sixth, and then the Queen televised it. And in a funny way, Kate and this royal Christmas concert does the reverse. As people leave church and don't celebrate in a Christian festival in a way that they used to, here's the royal family kind of reintroducing that idea. It's a bit like using carriages during a coronation. It gives the royal family that timeless stamp. And I find it an interesting sort of shuffle, the way in which, on the one hand, they embrace different parts of technology to lead us on into the future. We saw the Queen doing Zoom, for instance, in the very latter stages of her life during lockdown. And yet at the same time, we have one of the most modern players in the royal family taking us back to the traditional Christmas service. And it's a very clever juxtaposition.
I
But
love
also,
that answer. Go ahead.
I mean, but she plays the piano and things. You remember there was a wonderful scene of her playing the piano in Windsor Castle in a sort of blue evening dress. I mean, incredible. And I think she's also taken part. You know, I haven't been to those carol services, but I think she plays a part in the carol service too. I think, did she play the piano once there, or did she
Yes,
read?
she has played the piano. You're quite right.
So there
And the
you
other thing is, she's brilliantly talented like that. I mean, it was a bit like Diana when she suddenly got on the stage and danced with Wayne Sleep. It's similar. There is Kate. She has these exquisite, almost 18th century style accomplishments.
I'm also thinking, you know, when you were asking about historical traditions, I mean, maybe she will be known for her carol services in the same way that Queen Alexandra was known for the Queen Alexandra Rose Day, which was the sort of when she
Yes.
went round London, and that was hugely popular in its time. Obviously forgotten now, but I mean, you know, that and maybe each member of the royal family does or should have something like that, which they give particularly to the public, which they really enjoy. I mean, I think that I was fairly certain that if she was up to it, that would be the one thing she would do. She would do the carol service, and
Mm.
we're told she's going to do it, which is fabulous.
Absolutely. Oh, I am curious about the roses. Will you tell me? Can you put that in a brief
I wish I Yeah,
explanation?
she certainly made Queen Alexandra certainly made a. It was all to do with nursing, I think, and she certainly went round London in a carriage, and people came out, and I guess they all wore roses or sold roses. I can't remember. I wish I could. I
Oh, I'm,
didn't.
I'm going to look it up. How
I didn't
sweet
know
is
it was
that? I love that story.
it was, but she was, you know, she was known for that, and you know, and then you know, some of them have sort of like a Queen Mary's Needlework Guild and things, and
Mm.
that perhaps might be what you know you might one of the things you might remember about her. So I think it's not totally unusual, is it, Tessa, that they do something and then it
No.
takes
And
off.
of And of course, the other great day that the royals heftily partook in with floral garlands and the rest of it was Empire Day. But the less we say about that, the better, because of course we've now moved on to the Commonwealth with all its many complexities, of which of course the late Queen was the absolute sort of torchbearer for. And again, another role for Charles. He's got such a lot on his plate. And I think we saw that with the tour he did to Australia. There was really so much they tried to cram into so few days. And I wasn't surprised when Camilla came back and wasn't well for a week or two. It's a heck of a load when you're in your mid 70s. I expect they're heartily relieved that Kate is going to be carrying the candle at Christmas.
Oh, all right. Let's jump to royal. I guess this is not necessarily predictions, but in 2025, I wonder what the relationship will be between King Charles and Prince William. And let me tell you why I'm wondering this. Because an American outlet, Us Weekly magazine, is reporting King Charles and Prince William's dynamic has shifted amid tense power struggles. Quote, "It's no surprise that the Prince of Wales is gearing up to take the reins as future king. The dynamic has shifted," an insider told Us Weekly, with another adding that the sovereign has wanted to be the monarch for decades. Even though he's battling cancer, he's not letting that get in the way of his desire to be successful on the throne or a dynamic leader. Hugo, what is your response to that? I feel like this family's health might be the priority for 2025, I have a very hard time imagining that either is concerned about quote unquote power at this point.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think, of course, from the point of view of the king, he did wait a long time, and we touched on this earlier, to become king, and obviously he's not going to have a long reign like his mother. So he's an old man in a hurry. He's got to achieve a lot with in a very short time. He's a tremendous workaholic. I mean, he never stops working, and I mean that's the one thing that they worry about, I think, is that he works too hard, and he also, of course, works the people around him very hard as well. I don't think you'll find Prince William in any rush at all to wish to take over. Why would he? And I don't think many monarchs do. I mean, Prince Charles may have been thinking, well, perhaps I should have been allowed to be king a little earlier or something because he would have been younger. He might have thought that, but I don't think there was, I didn't see him craving the throne. In fact, I do actually know that one time when the Queen and Prince Philip were ill, and they were much iller than we were told. They were at Sandringham, and they sort of didn't appear at Christmas. I mean, he was absolutely miserable at the thought that suddenly, he was going to be flung into the top job.
Hugo, what are you hearing about the King and Prince William's relationship? To me, I read the story and I immediately thought, I was under the impression that it's grown stronger because of Harry's absence, because they kind of had to unite to figure out how to deal with this. So are you under the impression that it's a strong relationship today?
I think I am. Yes, I think so. I mean, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I'm not privy to any inside information on this, but as far as I can tell, that I think all the royal family are rallying round. I mean, the Prince of Wales, has not done quite as much as he normally would do this year because he's spending a lot of time looking after his young family, which I completely support. I think that's absolutely brilliant. So then, who else is there? Was Princess Anne, who, again, had a horrible accident, much worse, I think, than probably we were told, and seems to have made a very good recovery, which is great. And then you've got Prince Edward and Sophie, and then, of course, you've got a few other members of the royal family who are all getting quite old. So the slimmed down monarchy is very much there. So I think in that respect, Prince William is a key figure in the middle of it all. So I think that you'll find that probably there's a lot of interaction between him and his father, even if there isn't any between Harry and his brother or father, which obviously there isn't.
Thank you. Tessa, judging by Prince William's history, do you feel like he's eager to take control? I mean, I think I remember him being called the work-shy prince or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Do you agree with Hugo that the story's probably way off?
I think it's just a bit of tittle tattle to sell copies of US Weekly. Interestingly, I mean, William's sort of just shy of being a millennial, and I don't think they've ever put in the graft that the baby boomers and the Gen Xers have put in, to be fair. But I believe that William, ironically, having said this has been a really terrible year, personally a brutal year, has had, when you take stock, a very good year in terms of his standing with the public at large. He's had these sort of flagship events and programs that have really cast him in a very effective light. He went to South Africa for Earthshot. He came back and did this double-breasted documentary, Homewards, on ITV that was very well reviewed. And next year he's going to be headlining at COP30 in Brazil. And so there is a sort of statesmanly theme. He said himself he wants leadership with compassion because that's what the world lacks. He's clearly seen where he fits into this sort of era of turbulent strongmen, is determined to do things differently. Even his sort of, recognition stakes went up when he got his bit of bum fluff on the cheeks. And, it was the time of the Olympics and he was coming out in the TikTok videos. And so I think on almost every level, William has seen himself sort of come of age almost. And there is something really rather cruel about life where if you're served a personal googly like cancer in the family, it has that conflicting or contradictory way of actually sometimes bringing out the best in one, or at least from the perspective of the public, bringing out the best in William. He seems to have, I think, really found his stride despite the odds.
Tessa, I'm going to give you the last word, yes or no on the beard. I don't think Hugo wants to insert his opinion here. So yes or no on Prince William's beard.
The thing is, it's so unfair that men, and actually Hugo doesn't do this because he's got such a wonderful profile, but men, when they get to a certain age, as the rest of us sort of droop here and we think, will we use sellotape? Men just grow a little bit of stubble. It's called cheating. And really, I'm very cross about not having my own stubble. And I think it was just the right thing for him to do because it also offset his rather shiny bald head. And I think we both had a little swoon moment because I've always sort of wondered where William's looks went. I mean, it seemed extraordinary that he went from being sort of drop dead gorgeous to pretty much just a middle-aged man because he lost some hair. But suddenly, when he's in honorary military uniform with his hat on and the stubble, really, it's Diana reincarnated in a young, middle-aged, rather, man's body. It was show-stopping, I felt.
Oh, so handsome. All right. Well, royal authors and historians Hugo Vickers and Dr. Tessa Dunlop, thank you for your time and excellent insight today. Two of my favorite people. I finally got to hang out with Hugo. He doesn't know I've been waiting so long. Thank you so much for your time today. And I love hearing the opinions of both of you.